Hey everyone, welcome back to the Commitment to Growth podcast. This is your host, Mariana speaking, and thank you for coming back to tune into another episode of the show. How we doing? How we doing? It's so lovely to be here again. Hi everyone, thank you for coming back to tune into the show. If you're new, welcome, and if you're not new, welcome back. It's so awesome to be sitting here recording this solo episode for you here. Today, it has been long anticipated. We'll get into that in a minute. But as I'm recording this, we are like halfway done September, and it's just insane how fast 2022 has flown by. And just looking back at the last 2 years and what it's been for all of us, and just even kind of getting used to transitioning out of this pandemic, which, if you're in a place where cases are still really high and you're either in lockdown or restrictions are still very rigid, this may not apply to you and you may not relate to this, but it's been super strange, kind of like easing back into real life and getting used to social norms that were in place pre-COVID. I don't know if anybody else has felt that, but just being back at school and seeing everybody, like this time last year, everybody was wearing masks and everybody's like hugging and giving kiss on the cheek. It's so crazy, but happy to be here. Happy to be enjoying this aspect of human life, which is social time and social connection. And I'm so grateful for it. It has been a crazy summer, and I've been so off the charts on this show, and I hate it because it's my happy place. And there's been so many times this summer where I wanted to sit down in front of the mic and record something for you and post something for you, because truly, truly, this summer marked probably, I would say, I guess, like my greatest big life spiritual awakening until now. And I'll be talking about it more with you as the weeks come, because there's a lot that I want to share with you, which is part of the reason why I was so quiet, because I feel like I wanted to take this time to be with myself, sit with myself, reflect, do a lot of inner work to then be able to be here and give you so much better content, not just for the content, but just to make the show better with more insights and more realness, because I think that's a big thing that I've learned over the last couple months of this big internal journey of mine, is that it's very easy to say no BS until you have to be no BS with yourself, and you want to start hearing people's stories with no BS because you're looking for your own difficulties in their stories. So I'm just so ready to show up here differently with a whole new mindset. And I felt like there was no better episode than to kickstart this new season with than this one that I'm about to record for you today. So all that to say, it's been a super, super big growth period for me, a super, super big time of inner work and internal growth and coming home to myself and cultivating a completely different, more loving, more compassionate, more aware relationship with myself. And I'm excited to share that with you. So today's episode is a big one. I've had this episode written for some time. It's been planned, it's been sitting in my notes for some time, ready to be recorded. And the reason why I had not gone around to it up until this point is for a couple of reasons. The first being that some of you may have seen from my stories, I was going for round 2 of my MCAT exam, my medical school entrance exam. So spent the entire summer doing that and working, and I was not in the headspace to be planning podcast episodes. And then immediately after that, as you're listening to this today, 3 days ago, I submitted my medical school application, which is just the most insane thing, because it's that moment where, like, as soon as I press the submit application button, it's like wow, this is the first step into this dream that I've had my entire life, And it sucks because I won't find out if I got an interview or if I got in for a number of months from now, but it's just the most surreal thing. And of course, that required a lot of time and dedication because it's a whole process. So that was, I guess, the busyness aspect. But on a more personal note, the reason why I hadn't really sat down to record this episode is because I didn't know if I was ready to share some of this on here. The roots of this episode are about something that, or I guess, stem from a very personal experience that I had this summer, which I'll talk about in the episode. I wasn't really sure if I was ready to talk about it or how I wanted to talk about it because it's something that deeply affected me, but it's also a primary reason for this growth that I've had over the last couple of months. So I wasn't sure quite how I wanted to show up talking about it here and what I wanted to say and how to say it. And the other thing too is I feel like I kept pushing it off because I kept telling myself that it could be better. I was like, no, accumulate more knowledge, accumulate more insight. You need to make this perfect. I'm this like recovering perfectionist. And I think there's also a lot of grace in embracing how you are at a given time as it pertains to what knowledge you have, what insights you have, the awareness that you have, and embracing that and showing up with that. So I decided to stop pushing it off and to stop telling myself that it could be better because I had to accumulate more knowledge and insight and information and na. So here we are, and I feel like it's enough. Um, I am enough. I am showing up today with this information, and I think it's enough. I feel like it's enough for today. We're not going to accumulate anymore because I was also in the midst of a nervousness to record this. Very excited because I'm excited to keep showing up a little bit more personally on here and to build that deeper connection by showing you more of who I really am and the struggles that I've had. So, all that being said, we are here today as we are, and I invite you to be the same. I invite you to sit with me through this episode and to listen. And odds are that if you clicked on the title of this episode, it's because you're either struggling with or have struggled with something similar in the past. And the title maybe resonated with you a little bit. So I invite you to show up as you are today with me, to sit through this experience with me. We're going to talk, we're going to chat, we're going to be real, we're going to be raw, we're going to be vulnerable. And I'm excited for it. I think that's the root of real human connection and the reason why I've had the privilege of connecting with so many of you, because in some way our stories have overlapped, and I think that's the most wonderful human thing when connection comes from that. So without further ado, without further lingering on this, let's get right into today's episode. Before we get into the episode, I do want to respectfully acknowledge that it is being recorded from the land of the Wasanich peoples, particularly the Sartlip, Sayout, Saikum, Malahat, and Pakwachin nations, whose land I have the privilege of being an uninvited settler to. And for my Canadian friends, but of course this applies to anyone and everyone from all walks of life. As I'm recording this, the Day of Truth and Reconciliation is coming up on us on September 30th. And I would invite all of us to really take that day to reflect what that day means, what the term reconciliation means to us, but to actually take the time to listen to what it means from the perspective and from the experience of the oppressed, which in this case are the Indigenous communities in Canada. But of course, colonialism is something that has affected many, many people all around the world. And this is a day to amplify those voices, to sit and listen to them, and to acknowledge our privilege and how we can use it to start better recognizing what reconciliation has to mean, to truly make that word mean something. That is today's land acknowledgement. Thank you for listening. And without further ado, on to the episode. So, based on the title of today's episode, you probably guessed that we are talking about attachment, which I think has become a big buzzword in today's world of Insta therapy and TikTok therapy, with all of these, practitioners in the mental health field promoting their services and these psychological concepts online for free. And it's amazing. I absolutely love it. It has helped me a lot in my own journey. And I just love that this kind of information is becoming so much more accessible, especially to people that can't afford therapy or other means of, personal wellness. But I think that there's so much information all at once, all the time, that it's really, really easy to get caught up in what attachment style we fit under and what box we fit into, because I just think that we're so quick to put ourselves in a box just to try to explain why we do certain things and why certain things happen to us and where certain behaviors come from, and that's all fine. But once there's so much information all at once, I think that we lose ourselves in trying to box ourselves into a definition. So we're not going to get into the specific attachment styles today. We're going to do a very brief summary of what attachment is, how to identify if you have attachment, and how you can start doing the work to heal from attachment and to recognize that you have attachment and to start coming home to yourself, because that really is what healing from attachment is. It is learning how to give yourself what you are seeking from others and how to nurture yourself in a way that allows you to feel safe in yourself without always seeking for certain things outside of yourself. And we'll get into that in a moment. But the reason why this episode is so dear to me and why I wanted to sit here and have this conversation with you today is because this summer, just short of, I guess, 4 or 5 months ago now, as I'm recording this, I went through a very unexpected breakup out of a long term relationship. The reasons for which I am going to keep sacred to myself and the other person, but it was an experience that forced me to really, really come face to face with this very deep attachment wound that I didn't know that I had. And it was a brutal experience, to say the least, which is part of the reason why I'm sitting with you today sharing this, because I want to help you if you're experiencing this, if you're having any of the feelings that we're going to talk about today, because it's a super, super lonely place to be. It's a very debilitating place to be. And as hard as it is, I also think that it is one of the journeys that we all have to make that is the most empowering for building a deep, whole, trusting, safe relationship with ourselves, and for achieving relentless independence, and the kind of independence that is healthy, not in the I do everything for myself and by myself. No, none of that. I'm talking about the independence that lets you be grounded in who you are and lets you trust that no matter what life or what anybody else throws at you, you will stay on your feet no matter how rattling it is. And I think now, as I'm recording this, I'm finally feel like I've seen a light at the end of the tunnel, because for many months that was not the case. It was extremely lonely. It was extremely sad. I felt very vulnerable. I felt very weak. And I think it can be a very destructive place if you don't have the resources. I feel very lucky to say that I had my therapist and I had my family and I had my friends who had been through similar things and were able to really sit with me when I was at my lowest, when really dealing with this wound. And I think it's difficult. And I think that you'll relate to this if you've ever experienced this, because personally, as a self improvement, I guess, podcast host under that realm, I feel this deep pressure to always, show up like I'm always okay. Like I'm always working on myself. Like I've always got the tools. I've always got the knowledge, because you never want to have people question, who are you to be a self-improvement podcast host if you're not doing well and you're not doing what you preach and all that good stuff. But there's grace in showing the before and the after of your growth journey. And this is very much the before, what I'm going to share with you today. And I think that I guess I can't really say before, because I think it's still happening in real time. I think healing is a lifelong thing, and this isn't a wound that you really heal um you know in a couple of months. This can take, heck, years, which, saying that, is really discouraging. Don't let it discourage you. It really is. Wow, I just dug myself a hole. It's not. Um it's painful, yes, but it has led to some of the most nurturing and compassionate moments with myself, and it is part of the reason why I am able to sit with you here today as the person that I am, because overcoming this wound has been everything. I should say, learning to overcome this wound, because it's still happening in real time, has been everything for stepping into this newly cultivated version of who I am. So that's the backstory of this episode. Like I said, we're not going to get into the nitty gritties of attachment styles. We're going to give a very brief definition of what unhealthy attachment looks like. And I'm going to share with you how I came to realize that I had this wound. Odds are you've experienced similar things. If you know you had an attachment wound, or you've been told that you have an attachment wound, or you realized it before, or if you're experiencing any of these feelings that I'm about to tell you, odds are you might have an attachment wound, and that's okay. We all have attachment to a degree, because we are all at once were dependent on our caregivers. This is where these attachment styles are formed, and the way in which people gave us love when we were younger may not have aligned with how we needed it at the deepest individual level. And because of that, that need can show up in our adult relationships. And for some of us, they're a bit more all over the place. They can be a bit more destructive than others. For some people, it's more secure. Mine so happen to be not the healthiest. And not just, obviously, that doesn't just fall on a childhood level. It really falls on how my relationship with myself was cultivated in my upbringing. And we'll get into that more in the episode. But I just want to start this episode off by saying that if you resonate with any of this, and you find that you have an attachment wound, it is not a reason to shame yourself or to look down upon yourself, to see yourself as weak. It is something that is so deeply rooted at the nervous system level that I think that when we can all kind of see that and understand that from that perspective and embrace that, it's so much easier to forgive ourselves and to understand that really our body has always been trying to keep us safe. It's just that it doesn't know how to tell safety from non-safety. Not safety? Yeah. You know what I mean. When it's been exposed to similar patterns of non-safety for so long. So when you understand how rigorous this process of rewiring your nervous system is, you're way more capable of having deep compassion for yourself and to be patient with yourself in the moments where it feels like this process is taking forever, because it can feel like that. These patterns come up even when you think you've overcome them, and that's okay. We're going to get into some tools today that you can use when these patterns start to resurface. So, let's define unhealthy attachment first. Unhealthy attachment occurs when we become too reliant on a person or persons to give us something that we have not yet learned to give ourselves. This can look like love, acceptance, validation, soothing, companionship, reliance, trust. If you think of your relationship with yourself as a relationship that you have with a friend, It's easy to understand why we may be seeking these things externally, because when we haven't learned to be our own friend, which is completely normal, I think that when we leave our bodies because our nervous system is going haywire very often, we don't learn to cultivate that relationship. But also, we've been taught to so often, go look for friends outside of ourselves. Um, it's hard to even imagine giving these things to yourself, or being okay with sometimes only receiving these things from yourself. So again, this isn't a time where you should be shaming yourself. This is a time where you should be having deep compassion with yourself, because you may have left your body at some point because it didn't feel safe, and that's okay. We're here to talk about how you can come back to yourself today. Now, one quick thing I want to define here as well is that I think that attachment and codependency are two terms that get mixed up as being interchangeable sometimes, and they're not necessarily. Just because you have some forms of codependency, that does not mean that there is unhealthy attachment. Codependency is healthy when you are relying on a person to support you, which is very different than relying on someone to carry you or provide you with things that you are responsible for giving yourself. Now, of course, there is a time and place for codependency in any relationship, and it is very healthy in certain aspects. It can really strengthen relationships. As an example, if a couple just had a child, there will be one primary caretaker at a time, perhaps, in which case the other person might have to be the financial supporter for a while, or take care of more chores around the house. Um, this can even happen when there's been a death in the family, or a loss in the life of one of the people involved in a relationship, and the other person has to step in and support this person at a greater emotional capacity than perhaps they're used to. It's okay if there isn't always a balance in a relationship. Where it gets unhealthy is when there's more weight being placed on a person, or when there is a subconscious expectation that one person is supposed to fill you or make you whole, without you understanding that you are the one responsible for making yourself feel worthy of respect, love, and devotion. You have to have these fundamental beliefs, these fundamental virtues of being human, deeply held in your belief system, because without this foundation, if you think of your relationship with yourself as a house, love, devotion, time, respect, kindness, these are virtues that you are worthy of by virtue of being human, and they are the foundation of your home. Without this sturdy foundation, anything that you build on top is bound to be shaky or come crashing down. You have to have these beliefs within you, about you, in any relationship, to be able to foster a conscious relationship. And when you don't have these beliefs about yourself rooted in you, you are way more likely to engage in self-damaging patterns to try to get these things from another person. And this is largely revealed at the level of attachment. And it can become apparent in a lot of ways, most notably when you lose a person that once gave you many of these things, but also in how you see them. Does it feel like life would be a lot harder without them because you would be missing all of these things that they're giving you? Do you find yourself feeling anxious with the thought of a person leaving you, or spending, maybe extended periods amount of time without this person? Do you make yourself overly available for them to not disappoint them, or not have you think that you're not giving them your time? Do you neglect your needs and wants in the sake of respecting theirs? After a breakup or the end of a friendship, have you found yourself looking this person up more than usual, over analyzing interactions, or reaching out to them a lot, even though they hurt you, or even though there's nothing left to salvage? Do you find yourself thinking of going back to this particular person, again, friend or past lover, even when you know that going back to them would be self betraying, but you're tempted to go back to them because there is a hole that they used to fill for you that you don't know how to fill in yourself. Let that sink in for a moment. I know that was a lot, but these are some ways for you to recognize when unhealthy attachment or unhealthy codependency may be playing a role in your relationships. And with that being said and that being recognized, that is now a starting point for you to realize that the healing is going to come from you learning to give yourself the things that right now you may be relying too much on this person to give you. Manifesting things in me and manifesting negative beliefs about me that I didn't want to believe were true. And I found myself then projecting a lot of things onto this person to try to find an answer to all these questions, to understand why I had left. But this was actually my subconscious attempt to refute a lot of the things that I believe this person's absence was confirming about limiting beliefs about myself. I didn't want to believe that this person walking away meant that I was unlovable. There had to be another reason. I didn't want to believe that I was too much for advocating for my needs. There had to be another reason. And I didn't want to believe that I was disposable or that this person could do better than me. There had to be another reason. And this led to a lot of overanalyzing. It led to a lot of ruminating. It led to a lot of self shame for having wanted more and having asked for more, because why wasn't I grateful with what I was getting? But after sitting with a lot of these patterns repeating in my head all the time and finding myself at, the same deep dark hole every single time the narrative played itself out in my head, I started paying attention to where the root of a lot of this self-shame started coming from. And what I started to realize is that a lot of these fears about being unlovable and advocating for my needs were all a byproduct of experiences that I had had prior to this point, from which I had acquired a lot of limiting beliefs from my childhood and teenage years that I was now repeating in my relationships in my early 20s. And these patterns look like self-abandoning, neglecting my needs, telling myself that a person's actions reflected my worth, telling myself that asking for my needs to be met was being too much. And of course, in any rational person's mind, including my own, this isn't true. Just because you ask for something that you need does not make you too much. It makes you courageous. It makes you vulnerable for accepting that you need a little bit more from this person in that moment. But it was something that I never did, especially, if we're really expanding the lens out here as a woman, you know, to my fellow women identifying as women listening to this, how many times have we been silenced and told that we're just supposed to be complacent with what we get because if it's the bare minimum, it's fine. Or, there's very few good ones out there. So as good as it gets is as good as it gets. I couldn't live with that anymore. I didn't want to listen to that voice anymore because something that I have very deeply come to believe in the last few months is that if there is a part of you that wants more and keeps asking for more, is because there is a very deep part of you that already knows that A, you deserve more, and B, that there is more for you out there, and therefore you should honor that voice. And that took a long time. And again, that came only from doing the work to overcome this wound and to see that, just because this is the first time that I was advocating for my needs at such a deep level with somebody that I really, really cared about, and advocating for them meant that this person left my life, or that I had to walk out of their life in the interest of my needs and my joy. It didn't mean that those needs weren't worthy of meaning. It just meant that perhaps I had looked for them in the wrong place, or at this time in our lives at least, I was asking too much from not the right person. And I didn't realize how long I had spent relying on this person for my validation until I was single and I was left with that responsibility of self validating. And it's an extremely lonely place to be when you find yourself not even knowing how to give yourself the care, the love, and the affirmation that you need from yourself because you don't even believe the things that you're telling yourself about yourself. And it sucks. And it really feels like you're climbing up from the depths of the earth without seeing the light for a long time, because it takes a lot to rewire those patterns in your brain that have always been wired for negativity and for self-limiting beliefs, right? And attachment wounds are extremely important to pinpoint as soon as you can, because left unaware, they can lead you to do some very questionable things that don't reflect your true nature. And it can prolong your healing process by a lot and make it extremely painful. Seeking relationships too early, looking for love in the wrong places, engaging in behaviors that bring temporary gratification, but really are your subconscious attempt to just fill this hole that has now been left as a product of this person's absence. And what this healing process led me to realize was that I have a very intense abandonment wound that I had to learn how to heal, because this person leaving my life in some way confirmed my fear that I've held for a very long time, that I am worthy of abandoning. And very often our attachment stems from an abandonment wound. You think that attachment is like the root of it, but there's even more layers to it. And that's why healing, my friends, is so complex and so multi-layered and so multifaceted. And it takes many, many, many years, if not your entire life, because once you've unpeeled one layer, there's another one waiting for you. And it's just, it's the most fascinating, but the most, like, the amount of times I've looked up at the sky this summer and been like, universe, I'm good. Like, can I just chill out for a little bit? How many of you can relate? But that's the journey of coming home to yourself. And it's painful, but it's beautiful. And again, it's one of the most empowering things when you can learn to go through those layers and, in the fear of what you're going to bump into, have excitement about what things about yourself you're going to uncover and the versions of yourself that you are going to step into. So, little side note there, little empowering side note for all of my self healers out here. But like I said, very often our attachment stems from an abandonment wound that makes us act in ways that we believe will prevent us from being abandoned by a person. But this leads to self abandonment very often. So, as I mentioned earlier, neglecting our needs, being overly available for a person, putting their needs before ours, all that good self abandonment stuff. And that's never healthy, because subconsciously you will begin resenting the other person because you'll project it onto them for not giving you these things, when in reality, you're not advocating for yourself to get those things. And that's just a whole other deep, dark spiral into a deep, dark hole, which we don't want to go down in this episode or in life ever, which is why we're talking about it today. Healing from attachment involves you recognizing that there is no such thing as the one. You already have the one, and it is you. It is your relationship with yourself. And when you can embrace this idea, you are able to form more conscious relationships, because you are no longer getting into relationships that are rooted from a place of you seeking a person to complete you, It is you seeking companionship with a person because you see that in their wholeness, you can grow more and cultivate more wholeness within yourself. When you can get to a level of awareness that is trauma informed and self aware, you can better respond to people's actions in the future, like why you may be chasing unavailable people, why you self abandoned, why certain things trigger you. This self awareness that comes from this acceptance of attachment wounds and abandonment wounds allows you to avoid repeating the same patterns of self betrayal and accepting, less than acceptable behavior from other people in the future. Your relationships will never be formed from a place of fear of abandonment. They will be rooted in a place where you are ready to share love with someone and cultivate love with someone because you have already cultivated that love within yourself that you now want to pour out to other people. And that's pretty freaking cool. um, I think that something that is super, super important to understand about inner work is that it's not work that we do to overcome our past. It's not about leaving the memories of past relationships behind. It's not about leaving the past of wounds that people left behind. It's about how can you integrate that pain and the learnings from those experiences into the being that you are today to move forward in life with more awareness, more insight, more knowledge, and more tools to prevent repeating those unhealthy patterns. It's not about overcoming, it's about integration. I just felt like that was an important distinction that I wanted to make because I think that we're so quick to turn to inner work to try to use it to erase our past or to help us forget our past when there is no running away from our past. It is something that will always be a part of us. And I think that it is within us and up to us to see that as a gift to become more aware about who we are and the patterns that we tend to elicit in all aspects of life, relationships, challenges, areas of discomfort, so that we can become more aware within ourselves. So, again, just wanted to preface that by saying that because your past is a part of you. And when we can use inner work to integrate it, it becomes a part that we don't have to really shame of ourselves anymore. Now, now that we've talked about how you may know that you are attached or how to start pinpointing that you are attached, I shared my story, the feelings that I experienced. Let's talk about how we can start healing from our attachment wounds. Now, this is something that you can do while you are single, or if you're taking space from a friendship, or even within a romantic relationship that you are in right now. This is work that is always, always accessible for you to do. And I want again to preface this by saying that it is a process. You are rewiring your nervous system. You are learning how to make a home within yourself. And it's going to take time. It's going to take trial and error. It's going to take a lot of energy. But I promise you that it is one of the most worthwhile things that you will do for yourself to invest this time into healing this part of your relationship with yourself. So, the first step in healing your attachment wounds is recognizing that you may be attached or that you have an attachment wound. We kind of talked about this already in this episode, but the way you can start pinpointing this is do you find yourself having urges to reach out to your partner, a particular friend, a parent, immediately before you self-soothe? If something happens, is your alarm reaction to go seek somebody else's help right away? Or do you find yourself being too emotionally invested in people too quickly, pouring into people too quickly to gain their recognition and love, chasing unavailable people? Do you feel like you do a lot of things from a place of wanting to be seen and loved? Is one of the key indicators that you probably have an attachment wound or at a deeper level, an abandonment wound. um recognizing how much of your worth you have tied to a person, or how much weight you are giving this person's actions in dictating how you feel about yourself or how you feel in general. Do you give this person a lot of significance in credence in them dictating, the worth that you feel you're worthy of, the validation, the love that you're worthy of receiving? And lastly, when you ask yourself, am I worthy of love? Am I worthy of time? Am I worthy of respect? Is your answer, well, I must be, because this person gives it to me, this person shows it to me, etc., rather than I am me, and because I am me, and because I am human, I am worthy of these virtues by virtue of being human. These are key indicators that you might have an attachment wound that has arisen because there is something in your relationship with yourself that you haven't learned to cultivate yet. And that is okay, because the second step in this process is to forgive yourself and try to understand where these patterns came from. Again, attachment wounds really are an overactive nervous system that is trying to keep you safe because it wants you to feel loved. It wants you to feel seen. It wants you to feel welcome. It wants you to feel accepted. And in trying to get those things, the issue with our nervous system, it doesn't have a level of consciousness that we have at a more, higher self level. So it does things that have worked in the past because those things feel familiar, right? Doing big acts of kindness, doing big acts of love, throwing tantrums when we were babies, that worked back then. It might work now that we're adults. So the first step is forgiving your nervous system, your body, for trying to keep you safe and for trying to guide you to getting those things that you need as core needs. But this is a great place to seek help from a therapist or a guide that can help you through unearthing the root of these patterns, because it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of diving into the past and forgiving the people that might have been involved. And it's big and it's emotional. So have a lot of compassion with yourself through this process. Now, it's important to not get stuck in the root cause of our attachment wound and continuously use it as justification. That is your starting point to begin your healing process. And that is a self awareness that you have now established that can help you prevent repeating those patterns. Focus on moving from there and start exploring your urges to chase people or push them away with relentless forgiveness. And as you start unearthing this truth, as you start understanding where these urges come from, this is where you're going to start discovering the hurt parts of your inner child that is likely at the origin of your behaviors. Now, I say this in the loudest voice that I can say it in my house full of roommates, in all caps. Do not shame this part of you. This part of your inner child is the most wounded part of you, and it's been there for a long time. It's probably been there for longer than you've given it the recognition. And oftentimes, these wounded parts of us are at the root of our behaviors, of our most destructive behaviors, because it's our inner child screaming for its needs to be met, and it has never emotionally matured into a level that it needs to build conscious relationships if we've never acknowledged it or given it the energy to heal and the attention to heal. Doing the inner work around attachment wounds is learning to sit with and acknowledge your inner child, to comfort it and hold space for it to be heard, rather than making decisions from this hurt part of you. And we will talk about this in the next step. It is one of the most loving things that you will ever do for and with yourself to hold the younger version of you who at once needed something that it couldn't get and is now still seeking it, and tell it that you can take the wheel now, that you are holding them, that you are protecting them. I think that as often as our inner child tends to be associated with impulsivity, we have to give it credit for telling us what our needs are, even if it does so in the most impulsive way sometimes. That part of us is the least conditioned, most authentic part of us, and it just wants us to feel safe, seen, and heard. You need to address these needs that your inner child has to understand them rather than neglecting yourself, because otherwise they will get louder and you risk self abandoning again, and you risk accepting less than acceptable behaviors or dedication or effort from other people. So, to recap that real quick, the first step to healing from your attachment wound is recognizing that you may be attached. And the second step is learning to forgive yourself by trying to understand where your patterns are coming from by sitting with and comforting and hearing your inner child. Now, once you have taken the time to reflect on the origins of your attachment wounds, the third step is learning to reparent yourself. What reparenting means is that you are learning to get to a place where you no longer act from the impulses of your inner child. It doesn't mean that you discipline your inner child. No, it doesn't mean that you put your inner child in a timeout. That is bad. No, it simply means that you are learning to hold and soothe that part of you that is throwing a tantrum because it wants to feel safe, and instead taking up a space within yourself to say, I am safe. I got this. I can make this decision or move forward with this knowledge from an informed and aware state of mind. If you want a different way to think about your inner child, or the concept of it, is that, as I mentioned earlier, your inner child really is your nervous system hardwired to enter alarm state when a certain wound is triggered, in this case, our attachment wound, because it wants to protect you. And again, because we are rewiring our nervous system and rewiring all those nervous synapses and neuroplasticity and all that good sciencey stuff, which I won't get into in this video, this requires consistent practice. Firing is rewiring, meaning consistency makes the dream work when it comes to healing, when it comes to establishing a new relationship with yourself and establishing new beliefs about yourself. Once you consistently learn to comfort and sit with your inner child and get to a place where you feel like you are in the driver's seat of your reactions and your life, you can enter a state where you feel protected, held, seen, and affirmed by your own self. These consistent practices can look like affirmations, and I'm not saying repeating 10 affirmations a day, once a day. It means repeating them until you believe them, because that is the only way that they will make their way into your subconscious, and you will be able to say those affirmations on a regular day at a random time in the day with conviction. If you're using affirmations, you have to say them until you believe them. If you're just repeating them and hoping that they'll permeate into your subconscious, that part of letting them permeate is very much you taking up space in your own words to make them sink in to your subconscious. So, affirmations, a great way to do this, if and only if you believe what you are telling yourself. Spending time alone is another way, and becoming comfortable with doing this in the midst of emotions and thoughts that arise. I think that when we're alone and we start feeling uncomfortable in our own company because we don't like sitting with the discomfort of the things that are coming up for us, or the thoughts or the insecurities, we immediately seek to distract ourselves with other people or with other things. But a huge part of getting to a place where you can have this conscious relationship with yourself to heal your attachment wound is learning to sit with yourself and enjoy your own company and understand that you are not your thoughts. And when you can master that and you can sit in that and train yourself to just be a passive observer of them and use them as signposts towards the things and the parts of you that you need to heal, you are able to cultivate a way more loving and aware relationship with yourself. Now, holding space for your emotions when something triggers you is difficult, and you have to learn to self soothe before acting impulsively. I'm also not discouraging calling trusted people when you are having a low moment. But what I am saying is that there is a difference in reaching out to people for them to help you process things rather than reaching out to them and expecting them to save you because you haven't learned how to save yourself first. I think that, as the saying goes, between a stimulus and a response, there is a space. And when we can master that space before the response to sit with ourselves and to try to first understand why we're feeling certain things or to just hold some space for those feelings, we are way more capable of moving forward with more informed decisions as to how we want to process things, how we want to approach an interaction with somebody who we want to reach out to help us process things. A huge part of healing your attachment wound is learning to self soothe because odds are you haven't learned that before, or your attachment wound has prevented you from learning how to do so because it felt a lot safer to seek soothing and love from another person before. But this is at the core of it, is mastering that space between the stimulus and the response, learning how to hold space for yourself and your inner child to then make more informed decisions to move forward with. And the last two things on this list of consistent practices is to take space after conflict or argument, to bring yourself back into your body rather than dissociating or letting your wounded inner child take over. As I mentioned before, when our inner child is throwing a tantrum or is triggered in any way, it is very likely to start acting impulsively and do things from a place of deep fear of abandonment. And we make some very regrettable decisions when we are approaching a disagreement or a conflict from this state of mind, from this state of nervous system, you know, hard firing, anxiousness. Taking space before moving forward with conflict or making decisions in a conflict is extremely important to learn and to be able to ask for in a friendship or a romantic relationship, because it doesn't mean that you're walking away, you're throwing your hands up in the air. It is simply saying, I am triggered right now. My inner child is triggered right now. And I want to be able to make the most informed decisions possible to make a decision that is in the benefit of both people involved. Therefore, let me take space to calm down, to comfort this part of me, so that I can now take over on the driver's seat. When you can ask for this space, you are taking the wheel on your life and your ability to make conscious decisions. But also, over time, I promise you, you will get way better at not having to ask for this space and instead just having it become a very instantaneous move where you feel your inner child getting triggered, you comfort it, and you are able to take the driver's seat right away. It's a process, but at first you do have to ask for space, and that is so important and so worthwhile. And the person involved you need to make sure that they understand where you're coming from, and they should see it that way, as understanding that you're actually also doing this out of love for them and respect for them. When others didn't or are not giving us what we need, the most empowering thing is realizing that you can give yourself those things. Whether it was love, attention, space for vulnerability, you can be your own friend and parent. It just takes this work. And your relationship will start to transform once you can accept that you are worthy of wanting the things that you want, of your needs, of space to be yourself. And often the reason we have been so unsuccessful in the past with relationships is because we were expecting from others what we had not yet learned to give ourselves. So we did not know what that looked like authentically, right? It may be that somebody showed you love, if we're talking about the love languages, somebody showed you love in the form of quality time or acts of service, when if you hadn't really learned what love looked like for you, how you needed love in the past, it might have felt off. It might have felt like, they're giving me all this love and attention, but it doesn't sit with me. Something's not right. If you've never known how to give yourself love authentically, how are you going to know what you expect in another person? Use your relationships, use your past relationships that may have fallen or you may have gone out of, as tools to help you understand how you need love and how you expect love based on what is authentic to you. How do you need to be shown love based on what you want at your core, because it's what's most in alignment with your values and who you are. As you start doing this process of healing your attachment wound, it's going to feel slow, but you'll see it and feel it in nuances. You'll start feeling less impulsive. You'll be able to take up more space in that period between the stimulus and the response. You'll be better able to self-soothe. You'll feel yourself attending to your inner child as soon as it starts exploding. It's very awesome and very gratifying when the work that you're putting in, that you have been putting in over time, starts to become the default for you. Once your nervous system starts becoming more regulated to a place where you need it to be at the driver's seat of your life, that, my friends, is empowerment. It takes consistency, and more consistency, but I promise you, when you are comfortable being your own best friend, your own compass, your own home and safe place, other people will come into your life to share your roof over their head, not because they need you, but because they want to experience the beautiful home that you've built within yourself with you, and because they want to share their own home with you as well. Thank you so much again for tuning into this week's episode, everyone. I hope that this week's insights on attachment resonated with you and that you took something away to help you on your own journey of healing your attachment wounds and abandonment wounds. And again, remember that it is a process that requires immense amounts of self-compassion, self-love, patience, and self-forgiveness, but also immense kudos, because the fact that you are choosing consciously to go through this and to heal and to take this ownership of your life in these areas is so incredibly admirable. So please reward yourself for the small wins as soon as you feel them, as soon as you see them, because that will propel you further into keeping on doing this inner work, and you deserve that recognition from yourself. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing this space with me today. If you want to be more caught up on future podcast episodes, check out the podcast on Instagram and Facebook. It's at Commitment to Growth Podcast. You can check out the official website for the Commitment to Growth platform over at www.commitmenttogrowth.com. Follow me on TikTok for some access to more exclusive videos on self-improvement. It's at Commitment to Growth on TikTok. And if you want some weekly resources for self-development, self-improvement, wellness, and health, subscribe to the Commitment to Growth newsletter. There is a link in the description where you can hear from me weekly, get updates on latest podcast episodes and wellness resources that I'm sending out all the time, because it truly is all I spend my time doing, is looking up those kinds of things. And if you want to be a guest, or you have topic suggestions that you want to hear on the show, you can DM me on Instagram. As I said before, it's at Commitment to Growth Podcast, or shoot me an email. It's commitmenttogrowthpod@gmail.com. thank you so much again for being here. Your presence is so appreciated. Thank you for growing and healing with me today, because healing is an everyday, entire life thing, thankfully and not so thankfully. But wishing you so much love, so much joy in the coming days, so much strength in this journey that you are undertaking to reparent yourself and to be whole within yourself once again. And I cannot wait to see you in future episodes. Thank you for taking the stage with me today, and I will see you next time.